I was resting in the late afternoon sun, sprawled on my living room sofa, a cup of lukewarm tea on the side table, and the soft hum of my old ceiling fan circling above me. There's something about these quiet moments after lunch that feels like a small escape, a pocket of peace in an otherwise busy week. My house is usually silent, the kind of silence that lets you think without being interrupted, until today. There was a knock at the door, one of those polite, hesitant knocks, the kind that makes you pause and wonder who might be standing there. I wasn't expecting anyone, not at that hour. My first thought went to the mailman or a neighbor needing help with something trivial. But when I opened the door, I found Peter, my neighbor's son, standing there, leaning slightly on his bike, as if it had been a long ride. Peter is in his late 20s, always had a friendly smile that could disarm even the most cautious of people, but he's never been one to linger for long conversations. "Hi, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, voice a little uneven, a note of something I couldn't quite place threading through his words. I wanted to ask you something." I gestured for him to come in, my curiosity piqued. Usually, Peter just waved from the driveway and pedaled away. This hesitance, this careful pause before speaking, made me wonder if something was wrong. He stepped inside, leaving a faint smell of freshly cut grass and sweat from his bike ride. The air in the room seemed heavier all of a sudden, charged with a quiet tension that wasn't uncomfortable, just unusual. He glanced around as if seeing my living room for the first time, the light catching on the soft golden tones of the curtains and the worn rug beneath our feet. "Can I sit?" he asked, and I nodded, gesturing toward the chair by the window where sunlight pooled like liquid gold across the floor. He sat down, hands resting loosely on his knees, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. I felt an odd mixture of anticipation and concern, a flutter in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "I wanted to tell you, I've always admired you," he said, and I blinked. That simple sentence landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling through my thoughts. Admired me? Peter, my neighbor's son, someone I'd watched grow up from a polite boy into this young man standing quietly before me, admired me in what way? "I mean, you're strong and kind, and I've noticed how you handle everything. Life, work, family. It's inspiring," he added, voice trailing off, uncertain but sincere. There was no flattery meant to charm, no ulterior motive lurking in his eyes, just honesty, raw and unexpected. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I usually consider myself practical, even reserved, the type who keeps emotions tucked neatly away. But hearing those words in that quiet afternoon sun, I felt something shift inside me. A warmth, a recognition that someone truly saw me, not just the surface, but the little layers of who I am. "Thank you," I finally whispered, surprising even myself with how genuinely moved I was. That really means a lot." We sat there for a while, the room heavy with sunlight and silence, but in the best way. No rush, no judgment, just a quiet acknowledgement of a moment neither of us had anticipated, but both needed. And as Peter leaned back in the chair, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, I realized this afternoon had just taken a turn I would never have expected. It wasn't just a knock at my door. It was an invitation, a gentle nudge toward a connection I hadn't realized I was ready for. After that initial moment of silence, I offered Peter a cup of tea. It felt like a small ritual, the kind that gives conversations space to breathe, a bridge between strangers and something more familiar. He accepted with a quiet thank you and sipped carefully, as if the steam rising from the cup carried more than warmth, maybe courage too. We started talking, first about small things, the weather, the garden out back, the way the sunlight hit the living room at this hour. Peter seemed more comfortable now, his shoulders loosening just a fraction. And then, almost without realizing it, the conversation shifted. "You know," he said, voice softer now, "I've always felt like I didn't really know anyone in the neighborhood. But you've always seemed different. Open, but not in a way that's loud or showy. Quiet, but steady. I guess. I've always admired that." I smiled, a little embarrassed but genuinely touched. Most people notice the surface things: my house, my routines, the garden I fuss over. Peter wasn't talking about that. He was talking about me, the person behind the walls and curtains, and that mattered. "Peter," I said slowly, choosing my words. "It's rare for someone to see someone else like that, especially someone young noticing. Well, someone a bit older." I laughed softly, the sound filling the room. "Thank you for telling me." He shifted in his chair, hesitating for a moment before looking straight at me. "I didn't want to come off as weird or inappropriate," he said. I needed to tell you that. I guess I didn't realize until recently how much I wanted to say it." I felt a flutter of something unexpected in my chest, a mixture of empathy, curiosity, and that undeniable spark of human connection. It wasn't about age or about expectation. It was about honesty, about feeling seen in a way that matters. We started sharing more about ourselves, things that don't usually get shared with casual acquaintances. I told him about the challenges I'd faced raising my children, balancing work and life, the quiet victories that no one ever really notices. He listened, really listened, leaning in as if absorbing every detail, nodding at moments that seemed to touch him deeply. And then he told me about his own life, the pressures of work, the loneliness of moving away from the city where he grew up, the moments when he felt like he didn't have anyone who truly understood him. His voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't expected, so different from the confident, friendly young man I'd waved to across the driveway countless times. There was a pause, a shared breath between us, as the golden afternoon light faded toward evening. For a moment, I realized how rare it is to connect like this, to have a conversation that feels like it's about the heart rather than the surface. "I feel like I can talk to you," he said quietly, almost as if testing the air. "Like, I can actually be honest." I nodded, smiling gently. "And I feel the same, Peter. It's nice, isn't it? To be heard without having to explain everything first." He smiled, and it wasn't the casual smile of a neighbor's kid. It was a smile that held gratitude, trust, and something tenderly unspoken between us. In that moment, I realized that this encounter, this unplanned visit, had shifted something inside both of us. The sun slipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the living room floor. We didn't speak for a while, simply sitting together in the quiet, sharing the comfort of presence. I felt a warmth I hadn't expected to feel from someone so close in age to my own children. And yet, it was entirely natural, entirely real. Peter's visit, which had started as a casual knock, had become a doorway into something I hadn't anticipated, an emotional closeness built on honesty, respect, and the subtle thrill of discovering someone who truly sees you. I watched him finally stand, preparing to leave, and I realized I was already looking forward to the next conversation, to exploring this connection in ways that felt safe and genuine. That evening left me with a curious, lingering thought. Sometimes the most unexpected knocks on your door can open the largest doors in your heart. A few days passed after Peter's visit, but I couldn't shake the feeling of that afternoon from my mind. It was strange, like a thread had been pulled, and now part of me was waiting, quietly, to see if he would come back. I told myself it was curiosity, or maybe loneliness, but the truth was more complicated. There was a warmth I hadn't felt in years, something tender and alive, sparked by a simple act of honesty. Then, one late afternoon, I heard the familiar, hesitant knock again. My heart did that little jump that surprised me, and I found myself smiling before I even opened the door. Peter stood there, bicycle leaning against the wall, a gentle awkwardness in his posture that made him all the more endearing. "Hi," he said, voice quieter this time, almost nervous. "I was hoping, if you're free, maybe we could talk again?" I stepped aside, letting him in, noticing how the fading sunlight hit his face in soft streaks of gold. There was something different about the air this time. He seemed more vulnerable, and in turn, it made me feel protective and open in ways I hadn't expected. We settled in the living room again, and for a while, we didn't speak, letting the silence stretch comfortably. Then he turned to me, and I could see the weight he had been carrying behind his eyes. "I've been thinking about what I said the other day," he began carefully. "And I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I've found someone who actually understands me, even a little, and I'm scared of messing it up." I reached out, placing a hand lightly on his. "Peter, none of this has to be perfect. It's just two people being honest with each other. That's enough." His shoulders eased, a small sigh escaping as if he had been holding his breath for days. And then slowly, the conversation deepened, moving beyond admiration and curiosity into something more personal. We talked about our fears, our regrets, and our quiet hopes. I shared stories from my younger years, the mistakes that shaped me, the lessons that still guide me. He listened, and then, when it was his turn, he shared things I hadn't known, the small moments of loneliness, the pressure to always appear strong, the desire for someone to simply see him without judgment. There was an intimacy to the conversation that neither of us forced, but that grew naturally. It wasn't about physicality. It was about feeling safe enough to be seen, really seen, by another person. And yet, I felt a subtle tension, a pull that lingered in the air. Every glance, every shift in position seemed amplified in the golden light that filled the room. At one point, he reached for my hand again, hesitating, as if seeking permission. I didn't pull away. Instead, I gave him a small, reassuring squeeze. That one gesture said everything words couldn't: the acknowledgement of our connection, the consent, the trust. We sat like that for a long while, hands lightly touching, eyes meeting in quiet understanding. The sun had dipped lower now, painting the walls in deep amber, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the honesty, for the shared vulnerability, for the unexpected depth of this connection. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Thank you," he said simply, "for listening, for being here. It means more than I can say." I smiled, feeling a quiet ache of warmth in my chest. "And thank you, Peter, for trusting me." As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it for a moment, reflecting on how strange and wonderful life could be. A simple knock, a quiet confession, and suddenly the world felt fuller, richer, more alive. I realized that this connection, unexpected, consensual, and deeply emotional, wasn't just about him or me. It was about discovering that even at this stage in life, we could still be seen, still be understood, and still be moved by someone else in ways we never anticipated. I moved back to the sofa, letting the quiet settle around me, feeling a sense of growth and anticipation. The evening sky outside was turning soft shades of pink and lavender, and I realized I was ready to see where this bond might lead, not out of impulse, but out of curiosity, trust, and the willingness to be open to new chapters in life. After that evening with Peter, I noticed a subtle shift in myself. Life had always been a series of routines, small comforts, and predictable rhythms, but now there was a new awareness, a quiet excitement in the ordinary. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, to the soft knock that meant more than just a visit. A week later, he came by again. This time there was an ease to him, a quiet confidence that came from knowing he had been understood. We sat in the living room, the late afternoon light spilling across the rug, and I realized how natural it had become. Our talks, our silences, our small gestures of trust. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, voice soft but certain, "about how rare it is to connect with someone like this, to feel seen and accepted without needing to explain everything. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It's rare, I agreed, and it's something you hold on to carefully when it happens. There was a pause, a shared moment where nothing needed to be said. I felt a profound sense of gratitude, gratitude that life had presented this unexpected connection, that we had been open enough to embrace it, that age and circumstance hadn't mattered. We talked about the small things too: books, walks in the neighborhood, the way the light hits the garden in the late afternoon. And yet, beneath the casual topics, there was a layer of understanding, an intimacy born from mutual respect and honesty. It was clear that this bond was not fleeting. It was a slow, gentle unfolding, one that required patience and care. At one point, Peter reached across the coffee table and lightly touched my hand. This time, the gesture carried the weight of familiarity and trust, not the uncertainty of before. I smiled, letting our hands rest together, feeling a warmth that went beyond physical touch. It was connection, affirmation, and comfort all at once. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "Not with you, not like this." "Neither did I admitted, the corners of my mouth lifting in a gentle smile. "But I'm glad it happened." As evening fell, the room bathed in soft amber light, I felt a sense of reflection settling over me. This connection, unexpected, consensual, deeply emotional, had taught me something invaluable: that it's never too late to be seen, to be understood, and to share yourself with someone in a meaningful way. And in return, it's never too late to witness the courage and honesty of another human being. When he finally left that night, I didn't feel the emptiness that sometimes comes with endings. Instead, I felt calm, fulfilled, and quietly excited for the future. Life, I realized, still had surprises for me: moments of laughter, shared silences, and heartfelt conversations that could touch the soul. As I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, I looked out at the stars beginning to twinkle above the quiet neighborhood. The world felt bigger somehow, richer, filled with possibilities I hadn't imagined. And in the quiet that followed, I knew that this simple knock at my door had changed me, not in dramatic ways, but in the way that truly matters, by opening my heart to connection, respect, and the unexpected joy of being seen. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat back in my favorite chair, and smiled softly to myself. Life had reminded me that even in the later chapters, there's room for discovery, for tenderness, and for the quiet, beautiful moments that leave a lasting mark on the heart. And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely, wonderfully alive.